Chapter 1, A Grave Mystery. On August 16, 2005, the air temperature on the bank of the James River in Jamestown, Virginia, hovered at 100 degrees Fahrenheit. Sunlight flooded the beige-colored soil. At the bottom of a carefully excavated, highlight that, pit, the rounded surface of a human skull gleamed with a yellow-brown luster. The teeth shone white against the darker jawbone and the brownish soil beneath. The skeleton's leg bones stretched long and straight toward the end of the grave. In contrast, the arms were chaotically bent. Let's do in contrast. That's a good transition word. The left arm lay across the body, with the right flung up toward the shoulder. Who was this person? There was no gravestone to offer a name. No signs of a coffin, no pieces of clothing, no buttons. Nothing to identify the remains. Only bones. Let's highlight remains. Yet the small group of scientists who had gathered a few inches away from the pit's rim were confident they were about to learn more. One of them, Douglas Owsley, positioned himself next to the grave and studied the skeleton. He looked at the skull, particularly the teeth. Then he scrutinized the ends of each leg and arm bone. Let's highlight scrutinized. He examined the pelvis, the part of the skeleton formed by the bones of the hip and lower backbone. This is the pelvis. It didn't take him long to reach a conclusion. He was about 15 years old when he died, and he was European, Owsley told the others. So thinking about the main idea, if we want to put any other notes on this chunk of text, we've got a description of the skeleton. They have found a skeleton, they're uncovering it, digging it out, excavating it. So here we have our description of what they are seeing, what they observe, what they're noticing about the skeleton. And then we get into some questions introducing what are we going to learn? What are the scientists wondering? And then as they are scientists and they know very much about studying this kind of thing, here they start to draw some conclusions. All right. So if you want to take any notes to say, like, for example, this chunk is describing the skeleton, scientists wonder, and then scientists draw conclusions. Those are some nice things you could write there. All right, the next section, puzzles of the Chesapeake. The scientists who found the boy's grave have spent years working at several extraordinary sites in the Chesapeake Bay region. This area includes the modern states of Virginia, Maryland, and Delaware. The Chesapeake is of special interest to people who study U.S. history because colonists built the first permanent English settlement in North America here more than 400 years ago. The lives and deaths of these settlers have long intrigued historians and scientists. Let's do intrigued. Sorry, that got a little bit into the H, but whatever. Intrigued. Most early colonists could not read or write, so the historical record, a term used by historians to refer to documents written by people of the past, we're going to do historical record, contains little information about them. Historians have read and reread the surviving written records from the colony's earliest days. These materials contain fascinating information about the settlers and their adventures. But they don't tell the whole story. Archaeologists try to fill in the gaps in the historical record. They study buildings and man-made objects called artifacts created by the people who lived in the past. They also study the remains people have left behind. Now we highlighted remains on the left side of this page, but I'm going to do it again because it's important. Archaeologists. Yes, that one too. As they find, excavate, we're going to repeat that one, and analyze these objects, including skeletons, archaeologists help us understand the past more fully and reclaim the histories of individuals who had been forgotten with the passage of time. Let's go ahead and do analyze just because that's a good word too. The interpretation of skeletal remains is a specialized branch of science known as forensic anthropology. And we're going to get a little definition right here. The word forensic, I'm going to underline this because we're going to do this as one whole thing, but still. Forensic refers to the use of science and technology to help provide evidence or facts in a court of law. Anthropology is the scientific study of human beings and their ancestors. A forensic anthropologist, then, is a specialist who examines skeletons for clues that will provide evidence about the life and death of the people to whom they belonged. The skills these scientists use to help solve crimes and provide evidence in court are also perfectly suited to the study of human remains of centuries past. You know, I've changed my mind. We're going to fully highlight this one, and we're going to highlight anthropology. Cool. That's this page. Nice map on the left side, and at the top of the page. The tales told by colonial skeletons include sickness, sadness, and brain-teasing puzzles. Doug Osley, one of the world's leading forensic anthropologists, is an expert at coaxing these stories from the bones. He can determine through skeletal studies whether a person was old or young, healthy or sickly. He can usually tell if the bones belonged to a male or female. Had he or she done hard physical labor? Osley can often find out. Sometimes the bones even tell him the exact cause of death. The grave of the teenage boy whom Osley examined was among more than 30 discovered inside James Fort in Jamestown, Virginia. The fort's history dates to early 1607, when a group of men and boys arrived from England in 3 ships. They and their sponsor, the Virginia Company of London, shared the same goal: to get rich. They hoped that the lands surrounding the Chesapeake Bay would hold great wealth, especially silver and gold. During the summer of 1607, the settlers built the fort and named their new settlement Jamestown in honor of the English King James I. Although the fort burned down in January 1608, by April of that year, the men had replaced it with another. They also built houses, a church, and storage buildings inside the fort's walls. More colonists journeyed on ships from England, including the first English women in 1608. The year 1619 saw the arrival of the first people from Africa, who came to Jamestown unwillingly. Initially, these Africans had been taken forcibly from their homeland and held captive on a Portuguese slave ship. Before we continue, if you want to re-highlight forensic anthropologist up there, you can, but you don't have to on this page. There aren't any other special vocab words, but here you could make a note for yourself, like history of Jamestown. Remember, a lot of this we learned from the book we read. All right, moving on. The captain of a privateer, a privately owned, pardon the camera. Oh boy, we're gonna have to readjust. Pardon me while I readjust the camera. There we go. A privately owned ship that captures another ship and claims its cargo took 50 to 60 of the Africans from the slave ship. About 20 of these people were taken to Jamestown. The historical record is unclear as to whether they lived out their lives as slaves or became free persons. Together, the people of Jamestown built more homes and government buildings, grew crops, operated businesses, raised families, and buried their dead. In their quest for land and riches, the settlers spread out into other areas of the Virginia colony and built plantations. In the 17th century, the word plantation just meant farm. Jamestown quickly outgrew the area of James Fort. The materials used in the fort's construction were removed and used for other building projects. By the time the historical record reaches the 1630s, all mention of James Fort is gone. Again, here, if you want to re-highlight historical record, up there, and again down here. You can, but you don't have to. I'm going to go ahead and do a little underline just to remind myself historical record is here. All right, otherwise this is more history of Jamestown. Specifically, this chunk is about the history of the first Africans that were taken to America and what happened by the 1630s, so kind of a little bit later into Jamestown.